Welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to be talking about how to create captivating brand experiences using 3ds Max for the retail and the product manufacturing spaces. My name is Jose Lizardo. I'm a territory solutions engineer, which essentially means I'm a Max demo guy. I demo Max across most of North America to any customers that use Max in all the industries, games, VFX, design, viz, product, you name it. So I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. I've been using Max for over 20 years. I've joined the company here, Autodesk. And as a matter of fact, tomorrow, May 1st, is my 17th year anniversary. So I've been here for a better part of my career. With me, I have Logan Foster, who's a product owner on the 3ds Max side. I'll let Logan introduce himself.
Thanks, Jose. Hi, everyone. I'm Logan Foster. As Jose said, I'm one of the product owners here at Autodesk. My primary area that I'm working in is the modeling tools, so the cool modifiers and modeling geometry manipulation stuff that you get to play with and enjoy 3ds Max. That's the work that my team is doing. I've been a long-time Max user, just like Jose, probably 25 years now. Used it a lot previously in games and digital media and education before. And I've been with Autodesk for the past almost 5 years, 4.5 years now. So it's been a great time, been able to produce some pretty cool stuff, and hopefully you guys will see some of the value in it and enjoy using Max.
Thanks, Logan. So everyone knows Logan's my work BFF, and I absolutely love working with Logan. So with that, let's jump right in. The way we structured this webinar is going to be a little bit of the hows, or sort of a little bit of the whys first, and then we'll get into the hows and some of the workflows. So why do we care, right? Why are we talking about digital workflows for the retail space? Why do we care? Why should you care if you're working retail or you're a product manufacturer or just product design in general? Why should you care about digital workflows? The reason is quite simple. Competition in the retail space is very, very real. It's very thick. Margins are thin. Turning profit is challenging. There's lots of reasons why this is the case. You know, more and more people are trying to sell something. And by the way, we're looking at all this from the lens of online, right? I want to make that super clear. We're not looking at this through brick and mortar, which is this whole other can of worms. Really, we're looking at this through the lens of selling and buying something online in some sort of digital manner. You know, COVID, the pandemic, accelerated online buying. You have a lot of manufacturers that are selling directly to consumers, skipping the whole retailer altogether. That's a big trend that I see, you know, really, really relevant and really present. You have now with social media, everyone and your grandmother is selling something. Micro shops popping up on TikTok and Instagram all over the place. Everyone's trying to sell me something. I'm sure everyone on this call and this webinar is experiencing the same thing. So this is what keeps retailers up at night, is how do I stay relevant? How do I differentiate myself? And how do I keep myself cutting edge? I think that the retail space is one of the most innovative spaces, one of the most innovative industries, you know, and competition breeds innovation. So, you know, all technologies that are flourishing right now, a lot have to do with the manufacturing / retail space. And so what matters in this space and what differentiates is content, right? When you used to have 3 images to sell a product online to represent a product, today it's 20 images, videos, AR experiences, configurators, you name it, right? Content is king, and generating content is overwhelming. The need for content and the demand for content is only going up. It's going up exponentially. It's certainly not going down. And this can be overwhelming to a lot of folks running these businesses, trying to understand, how do I keep up with the demand, the ever-increasing demand for content? If you look at the traditional way of generating content, right, or how do I represent my product and put it on a website, that's usually through photography, whether it's manufacturers or retailers directly going to photo studios and photographing their products, or even internally through photography, or whether that's leveraging sales and marketing assets of a photographic nature from you know, product manufacturers. It's photography. That's been the go-to method for the longest time. And what we're seeing now is the sort of rising of 3D. And there's lots of reasons why 3D or CGI, call it whatever you want to call it, has become the go-to sort of, is becoming more and more the go-to. And in my opinion, in the next 10 years, it will be the majority of content you'll see online to represent products will be done in CGI. And that's not to throw shade at photography. If any, you know, photographers in the webinar today, I think photography will also have its place. It'll be more niche, but it'll have its place. There's lots of reasons why CGI makes a lot more sense. It's cheaper, it scales more, it's better for the environment. I mean, there's a host of reasons why it is taking a lot of space right now. Let's look at one example. Let's have this chair and I want to photograph it for my website. Well, I bring it into a photo studio, take a few images, put it on the web, no problem there. What happens if my product has different variations, fabric variations? You see how challenging it is to photograph all these chairs. I've got to bring them all in, do the same thing, repeat. It's expensive and it doesn't scale. And all these chairs are not sellable after. They're all sent to the dumpster, right? So a lot of waste. Think about products that can be configured. All the permutations of those configurations become endless and nearly impossible to do through photography. Scale, right? Like I talked about earlier, the demand for content's not going down, it's only going up. How do I do this at scale? You just simply cannot, at scale, through photography, get your content out and ready. This is what CGI brings to the table. A lot of these workflows can even be automated. I speak to retailers that generate thousands of images in one night just by pushing a button, right? So it starts to become a mechanism or a method for generating sales and marketing assets that's really, really appetizing for and I'm going to go back one slide here just to make sure I cover another point. Really appetizing for retailers. Another really important point to make is that when I take a picture of a product, that picture is stale the second I take the picture. It's good for the use that I did it for, but I can no longer ever reuse this picture going forward. CGI get a lot more mileage out of your assets, and I'll cover this a little bit later. So think about a typical product launch for a new product, right? It goes through engineering cycles, design review, you name it, gets sent overseas to get manufactured. That can take months. And only when you receive the product, either the prototype or the finished product, back to your company's facility, can you start taking pictures of it and getting your sales and marketing assets ready. It's a very waterfall approach or a very linear approach. If you think about the same thing, but in a digital product environment, as my engineers are creating my CAD models, they can be shared, those files, with my visualization artists to immediately start creating those sales and marketing assets, those photorealistic images to represent the product. In fact, I can have all of my sales and marketing assets ready way before the product ever physically exists. That opens the door to a ton of possibilities that is really appealing to the retail space. Another smaller but really important thing to think about also is brand and website consistency. Too often I go on websites of retailers that don't use CGI. It's very clear and obvious to my eyes, at least. From one product to the other, there's different kinds of images, different amounts of images, different styles of images. Or even when there is some sort of consistency, it's almost impossible in the real world to have the exact same camera angle, lighting conditions. All of that varies because it's the real world. All of that is gone in CGI. It's total consistency, complete control and accuracy over where things are positioned in space, how things are lit in space, and how the images are produced. And that, for companies that care about their brand and care about the consistency and experience on their website, is king. So website consistency is definitely something that not to be neglected. Also, sustainability. If you look up any company's mission statement, sustainability and environmental impact is a big deal more and more these days. We talk about it more and more. And so nothing is more better for the environment. I mean, there's some electricity used for computers, but let's face it, not nearly as much waste as in creating photo shoots. I'll give you one very concrete example. If I'm a kitchen manufacturer and I need to photograph a kitchen, I need to build that kitchen. That's a lot of materials that I'm putting into a photo studio just to take a few pictures of. Think about expensive materials like granite countertops. I spend all this money, not only super expensive, not very cost effective at all, to create my photo shoot, and then I basically scrap it all and lose all that money, and I'm not really good for the environment. Big impact on the environment. A lot of wasted product. All of this is free in CGI. Whether I'm creating granite countertops or plastic materials, it's just texture maps. It's all essentially free in CGI. CGI is really another important factor for when thinking about sustainability and environmental impact. So just to summarize, right? Photography is great for niche workflows, for specific use cases, for intricate experiences and moods that you might want to create that are very, very specific. But for the general layer of everyone trying to create just content to sell their products, CGI is really king there. Photography gets stale, like I said. You can't reuse any of this after the fact. If you think about a 3D model that's generated to represent a product, I can reuse that model in so many different contexts after. You get way more mileage. Like, not only can I use it to create renders of the product itself, I can then put it in the background of a lifestyle shot to embellish an environment. I can reuse it later on in a seasonal campaign, maybe for Christmas or for Halloween. You can use it. And all these models become just part of a library of models that retailers have access to at any moment in time to create some sort of campaign or some sort of a need, right? If you think about taking that a step further, using animation, you can better illustrate how a product functions, or you can create great assembly instructions using animation. You can't do that with, in the real world. It's hard to document how something is built using a camera and recording something. And then, of course, for some of the more advanced retailers out there, the more innovative retailers, leveraging technologies like augmented reality lets you have this try before you buy experience. How will this chair look like in my home? How will this shoe look on my foot? How will this makeup look on my face? How will this watch look on my wrist? Right? So these are more niche for sure, but this is just the beginning. In 10 years, these will be standard technologies used across all retailing space. A retailer said this to me a year ago. I thought this was a brilliant analogy, and I really want to make sure I say it here today. It's not about whether CGI is a thing in retail or not. It is a thing. It's about how do I jump on the train? The train's left the station. Like CGI in retail, it's there. It's there to stay and it's there to grow. How do I, as a retail, jump onto this moving train and get myself relevant? It's of my opinion, and it's a very personal opinion, that retailers who are not embracing CGI workflows today or digital workflows today will be left in the dust in the next 10 years. So something to keep in mind as you are working through modernizing your businesses and leveraging 3D. Now, let's jump in. Let's do this. Let's look at now we looked at some of the whys. Let's look at some of the hows. Who doesn't like a good Dwight gift? So I want to review very quickly what a traditional digital double workflow looks like. And again, I'm looking at this through the lens of CAD. And I want to just caveat this real quick. There are different ways of generating a 3D model of a physical real world product, right? There is modeling from image reference. Small parentheses, my first job out of college, I modeled cell phones all day, every day for 2 years. I got fed up and eventually went to Autodesk. But, we would get, and this is 20 years ago, guys, don't laugh at me, I'm aging myself, but we didn't have iPhones, and they weren't as slick and simplified as this. We had Nokia flips and Motorola flip phones, which had so much intricate physical detail that needed to be modeled. We'd actually get them FedEx to our studio. We would scan them in our giant scanner, Xerox scanner. Every angle of the phone was scanned, brought into Max as reference images, and I would spend 3 days. My budget was 3 days to model, shade, light, and render 16 angles of each phone. I did that for 2 years, and I got fed up and I went somewhere else. So the point is that, modeling from image reference is definitely a way of generating 3D models. It's not the only way. Photogrammetry is also a way of doing it. I see that a lot of retailers are using these techniques also. Photogrammetry is the process of photographing different angles of a product and generating a 3D mesh through a photogrammetry app. In this pipeline here, we're looking at using CAD models, right? And so we're going to look at all these different things today, but this grid you see here is generating CAD models. Max can consume CAD models, pretty much any CAD application that you can think of. Natively, we support Inventor and SolidWorks, like assemblies and parts, like direct import without having to convert or go into a sort of middle step file, generic CAD file format like a step file or STL files. You can still use those, of course, if you're coming from a different application or FBX or any other asset or any other sort of file format to get your model into 3ds Max. From there, you're often going to go through a mesh cleanup process. Often in the manufacturing space, a lot of the inner parts of your models are generated, of course, for manufacturing purposes. But for visualization, we don't need any of that because all we need is the shell. So clean up the mesh, make it more lightweight, and get rid of all the things you don't need to render. You go through a step then of course, applying materials, shading. Is it plastic? Is it metal? Is it brick? Is it this? Is it that? You assign materials. We have all sorts of workflows to do that in Max. Typically, if you're going to the process or the method of creating, photorealistic 2D images, then you're going to light the model. You have different lighting techniques in Max, image-based lighting, studio light rigs are the typical ones I see in the space. And those get rendered out in any render engine of your choice. We have Arnold at Autodesk. It's part of Max for free. But you also have access, of course, to Corona and V-Ray as external plugins to 3ds Max. If you're going the real-time road, which is basically creating versions of these models that are lightweight, portable, web-ready is what I call them, you can go through processes like texture making and retopo, and then output those into a format that perhaps maybe a game engine would consume, like FBX, or GLTF for WebGL, consumption over on the website of things. Okay, this is the agenda. I'm going to go through it really quick, and I'm going to pass the baton to Logan to talk to you a little bit about viewports. We're going to go over the Max viewport. Max has a great looking viewport. People don't know that. It's awesome. It can even be your final image. You'll see what that looks like in a minute. We're going to go through some lighting, some cameras, and some rendering workflows. Then we're going to take a quick stop on how to deal with scan geometry, some modeling workflows, and the infamous try before you buy, which is basically real-time tech in the form of augmented reality or configurators. So Logan, you want to introduce the next section?
Yeah, let's do it. So let's talk about these stunning viewports in 3ds Max. So with 3ds Max, since the version 2021, we've been really putting a lot of emphasis and focus on making the viewport be that first and primary trusted area that you're looking at. So we want to enable things like depth of field, HDR lighting, PBR materials, stuff that makes it really high quality and almost a one-to-one render representation of what's going on between your viewport of what you're seeing and the final render. So we're saving you guys a lot of time, not having to, do test renders and sample renders and IPRs and things like that. What you're going to see in the viewport is what you're going to get for the output. And Jose is going to go through a really cool workflow right up next to kind of show you a good example of this.
Thanks, Logan. Yeah, so Logan said the best. I mean, the Max viewport is really, really sophisticated, and it's probably one of the more flies under the radar kind of thing. I always talk about it everywhere I go. I make sure people know, hey, the Max viewport's freaking awesome. And it's been awesome for a long time, but it's been more awesome in the last few years. So the next workflow I'm going to show you is how to get the most out of the viewport, how to set it up properly, and how to do some look dev in the viewport, and how to actually leverage HDR lighting, and pretty cool HDR lighting as you'll see, not the standard dome stuff, that too, but more than that, to create fantastic looking imagery of your product. So this is, of course, oh, we got to do some polls. That's right. Yes, let's do some polls. Forgot about that. So we have some intermediate people, quite a few beginners, and a little bit of experts. So on the poll now, let me see how many people have responded. All right, share the results. Share the results. Okay, stop. So you guys see that the amount of people that are the demographic of people that are in this room today. Let's stop the poll. Let's go on to the next poll. Logan, you want to run those? There we go. What version of Max are you currently running with? Let's see, Max is coming in. So I'm going to end the poll. Still some answers coming in. We're still answering. Let's kind of end the poll now and share the results. I don't see them, but I'm guessing everyone else can see them. Okay, let's stop sharing this. And do you want to launch the last one, Logan? There we go. Up to date. Yeah. So what methods do you guys keep use to stay up to date on the things we do in Max? This one's really coming answers. Social media and newsletters being the two top that I see here. Cool. I think social media is where we want to be. advise everyone all the great things we build. I mean, we're constantly building Macs, and I want that to be super clear to everyone. So if you're not aware of what we're doing, reach out in some shape or form to us directly, social media, newsletters. You'll find all the great things we're doing. Okay, let's end the poll and keep going with the webinar. Just show it up in here. There we go. All right, share the results. There we go. So social media and newsletter being the two top hits here that we see in this poll. Okay, so let's kind of jump right in to our back into our webinar. Let me just yeah, okay. So you see we have this pair of Bose headphones, and you know, they look great in Mac Super. It's all real time. None of this is rendered. It's just tumbling around a model. It's lit, it's shaded really, really nicely. So how do we achieve this in Mac? So here we have the headphones, and the first thing we're going to do is bring in a HDR environment match node and load in a dynamic range dome image of this particular environment. We added the shader a couple of releases ago. We can edit directly in SME to get to its settings. We can change the image. If you don't have these, they're available online. You can buy libraries of these. You can get them for free on HDR Haven. There's a ton of places where they exist. So we're going to go ahead and settle for this laboratory type image, but you see the background is really crappy. That's because the default settings in Macs are not very good. We want to make sure we change these. So we're going to go into our viewport configuration dialog, increase the resolution of our background images, add some anti-aliasing, and now all of a sudden it looks a lot better. We're going to go into high quality mode. This is something that we changed. When you enable high quality mode, you're basically turning on all the bells and whistles, skylighting. You're turning on hardware shading for your materials, which you have to do in the past. You have to go to various different places to get to this look. Now it's all wrapped into one high quality viewport. And that's great. I love that because I just hit one button and it's done. You can go into the per viewport settings to add some more additional, to access additional parameters. I'm not a fan of the flickering viewport, so I turn off progressive skylighting. I don't think it adds that much, but I still have ambient occlusion, which is also really nice. So I like to go in and dial in my ambient occlusion, get into a place where it makes sense. So I get all my nice contact shadows directly in the viewport. This is a very gamey feature, game engine feature that we have inside of Max in the viewport. I can store all these settings into a preset file that I can share across members of my team so everyone can have the exact same viewport experience, look, and feel. And you can go back to this preset anytime. So back to our HDR image that we loaded, our HDR loader where we loaded the image. I'm going to go ahead and make some changes here. You can rotate, of course, your image. You can change it to a different HDR image. I can add some tinting if I wanted to. I can adjust the exposure. A ton of plethora of settings in here that I can use. I can blur the background. I'm not crazy about the background blur, to be honest with you. It's a little bit, it's hardware. Let me just blend this, pause 1 second. It's hardware blurring, so it's not that great. Instead, what I like to do is change the background image. So this is a really important notion to understand. In Max, you have what you see in the background and what is used to illuminate your scene. Those can be different things. Right now, at the start, they were one and the same. By enabling use custom background on my HDR environment node, I can use a different background image than what is used to illuminate the scene. So here I just set it to a static gray color. It could have been an image, but I'm still using that laboratory HDR image to illuminate my scene as you see here. Now, what's really great about this is I can go ahead and use the additional light setting of this. This is a brand new sort of paradigm in Max. We couldn't do this before. It's been around for a few releases now, but that's the ability to load an image source of an actual light bulb. So when we think about HDR images, we think about dome images, 360 images that wrap around your scene. No one ever thinks about it in the sense of actual light sources. It's almost akin to HDR Studio, which is a different application. So it's a lightweight version of that. We could basically just bring in this HDR light shader, plug it into my environment, and load in any one of those light sources. This basically takes that images, comps it to the background, and positions it where I want, and acts as another additional source of light. We can use Max's place highlight feature to accurately position where this light will be in space. It's basically looking at the surface normal below the mouse cursor and perpendicularly aligning it in space. And it's just comping it onto the background image. And this in the world of product design and rendering is king because highlights on reflective products is super, super important. You'll talk to any manufacturer out there, the position of the highlight and where it looks and feels is super, super important. And so you can very accurately adjust that using these features in these workflows. You can adjust the temperature of the lights, you can adjust the size of the lights, the intensity of the lights, but they are all just images. So I'm fully lighting my scene just using different formats of HDR content, which is really, really cool. No light objects. Again, just high dynamic range images lighting my scene in a very accurate way with a lot of control. So let's move on from this and see, I rendered these 3 images directly out of the Max viewport. No software rendering here to create this ad for those. Same thing with this Canon camera. It's a model I brought into Max, and I basically just changed the different HDR images to show you how nicely it reacts to different HDR light sources. It's beautiful. I mean, Max viewport's gorgeous. Let's be honest. All right, I'm going to pass it on to Logan to talk a little bit about the Arnold render engine.
Thanks, Jose.
Sure.
Those are great examples there. So let's talk about the lights, the camera, and the action going on in Max. Get ready to render. So with Max, as Jose said, we offer support for a lot of different first-party and third-party renderers. There's quite the choice out there, so you can use what you want to use. Thankfully, for everyone that's got a copy of Max or Maya, we have purchased a number of years ago a really top-notch VFX quality render engine called Arnold. And so Arnold, you get a license of it with every license of 3ds Max that's available, and you've got access to it right inside of Max itself to do all these high-quality renders. And as a fun note as well, actually, it's even being used to drive the viewport that we were just looking at before. So Arnold's a really integral part of Max, and we're going to show some really cool stuff going on with that.
Awesome. Thanks, Logan. So yeah, let's take a look at some workflows. We're going to go through some standard sort of material setup workflows as a sort of foundation, right? If for some of the most beginners in this call, beginners in this webinar, going over material setups, how to define materials, how to break up a mesh and assign materials to different parts of your mesh, and go over some lighting techniques using Arnold. So let's first look at materials as a starting point. So I want to create leather, right? So I got my physical material in here. That's going to be where I define all of my surface properties, but I want to bring in my textures. I'm going to be using a traditional PBR texture kit that I got online of leather. It defines leather using base, basically diffuse, roughness, and normals. And we're going to bring these in using OSL's bitmap loader node. We're going to bring all these in. Again, I got these online for free. There's a bunch of places where you can get PBR kits. You can build your own, you can buy your own. There's lots of different sources for this. So we're just going to bring in those 3 different texture maps and plug them into the corresponding inputs of my physical material, my base, my roughness, and my normals. Remember that when using normal maps in the physical material, they need to be connected first to a normal bump shader. The physical material does not behave properly if it doesn't have that intermediate node. We can lay things out a little bit, apply to my test scene, and you see that I have a really nice looking leather material. Now, the problem that I have right now is that if I wanted to change the tiling of this texture or this leather, I have to dial in the tiling in 3 different nodes. Remember, because we have base, roughness, and normals. Instead, what I'm going to use is one of OSL's transform UV nodes to connect and centralize the scaling from one node. So connect it to the UV input of all my bitmap loaders, and now by using the scale value on the transform node, I can very quickly dial in or dial out the pattern or the tiling of my leather. So what happens now? What do I do next? I want to create a material library where I store these in. I want to standardize and start creating a library. You can even buy libraries and materials online, of course, but I'm showing you how to actually make a library in Max. So we're going to go to the material map browser. We're going to create a new library and give it a name. And now I have a library. It's my own library. It's stored on disk, and I can share it with anyone. I'm going to drag basically the output of my material directly into it, and now it's stored in that library. I can create any number of variations of this material and store those variations in the library. Let's look at how to make variations. I want to create different colored leather materials, not just black. So I'm going to use a color correction node, and I'm going to put it in between my diffuse and physical. So I'm just plugging the diffuse. Again, we don't want to modify the normals or modify the roughness. It's just the color part of my material setup. So using some tricks inside of the OSL color correction node, by modifying some of the tint values, I could very quickly create any number of variations, adjust even maybe the specularity to create, more matte type leather or shiny leather. You can use, to your heart's content, all of these nodes to create any number of variations based on the needs of your studio. Again, this is creating materials from scratch. A lot of folks actually buy material libraries. This is all, pre-baked, but it's good to have a good understanding of how this works. Now, let's say you have a mesh that is all one single object, and I want to break it down in order to create, assign different materials to different parts of the mesh. This leather bag has different leathers, different color leathers. It's got a black leather trim. It's got chrome elements, metallic chrome elements. So we're going to break this up. We're going to use material IDs to do that. So on my editable poly, I'm going to go to face sub-object mode, and I'm going to start selecting parts of my mesh and assigning a material ID, right? So we can go to element sub-object, grab the side pieces, make them one element, grab my straps. I know it's a different material. I'm going to make those a different material ID. I'm going to grab all my chrome parts, all my metallic parts. They're all elements. That's easy to select. Make them a separate material ID. What happens if I want to select faces that are part of a mesh? They're not separated as an element. Well, I'm going to go like the trim of this purse, for example. Well, I'm going to go into edge sub-object mode, grab a couple of edges, hit the loop button to loop along the entire trim. And then I'm going to use Control, hold, and select face. So it converts the edge selection to face selection. Use the grow function to add a bit more. And now I have another selection that I can store as a different material ID. So I've separated my mesh into different material IDs. And I can go back to my material library that I created a little bit earlier, bring in all those leather materials and chromes and whatever it is that I need for this specific purse, drag them into my slate view. I'm going to collapse things a little bit so it's a little bit easier to understand what's happening. And I'm just going to basically connect those into a multi-sub-object material. The multi-sub-object material allows me to assign materials to different material IDs on my mesh. Because I predefined them in the step before, all I got to do is connect them into the right input, and they will appear on the right surfaces of my first geometry. So you see that what this looks like, and this is all just captured directly out of the viewport, no rendering done here. And just by modifying the color of each individual, creating different variations of my leather. That's all I was doing, and I created a chromatin. Pretty simple stuff. Now, what happens if you want to store multiple different patterns? We call these colorways in the retail space, variants in the CG space. It's basically, all of these different colors on different parts of my shoe, but what if I have different kits? Well, I can store those now in a material switcher node. So here I have my different kits. I got my blue shoes, my green shoes, my red shoes. We can also, by the way, in Max, collapse all these into a compound, which is really cool. That was added last year. So if I select everything, right-click and say package into compound, everything's stored in one node. Clean, easy way of working with lots of complex shape trees. So I'm going to grab a material switcher, which is a brand new shader. And now I can connect these in. In this case here, I'm going to have 4 inputs. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the 4 first inputs. I'm going to set my node to only have 4 inputs to remove the unnecessary UI. When I assign this to my shoe model, what I can do now is I can cycle between these different material kits, is what I like to call it. So it's a little bit more easy to understand. Again, we're still using multi-sub-object materials to assign materials to different parts of the mesh, or I'll have different sets of these that are assigned to the same shoe, living and stored on the shoe. When the shoe transport out of Max, this comes with it. And of course, unicorn shoes. Who doesn't want unicorn Nike shoes? Okay, we also added is the PBR material. So everything you've seen right now is on the physical material, which is our giant, all-encompassing material for all sorts of needs. But we also have a simplified PBR material, which is a scripted front end to the physical material. This is great if you're just dealing with, if you're defining a material with strictly texture maps, which is a standard PBR setup, right? Just texture maps. You're not using any shading techniques. You're just using texture maps to define the different parts of a material of your shoe and of your material. You can get these PBR texture kits online also for free, or you can buy a bunch. I have brown leather here and brown wood that I brought in. Oh, sorry, I went back there. Let me just play this back again. So we have a physical material. I'm going to drag and drop in my base, my roughness, my normal, and my AO into the corresponding slots. Again, simplified version. This is supported in FBX. Unity and Unreal support this shader. So it's a really great way of just creating a lightweight, super easy to use model that's portable and agnostic to 3ds Max. And it renders beautifully in the Max viewport. Okay, let's look at lighting workflows for Arnold. This is a pretty standard thing you want to do, right? With your products, you want to make sure that you create some nice light rigs that you can represent in a photorealistic way the products that you need to represent. So typically we have this nice little geometric environment. This is used, we add these, manually. This can be stored as a light rig in any template file that you might have. And this is used to bounce lighting around a little bit, create a little bit more interest, I would say, in the final image. First thing you do, camera shot. You got to define your camera angle. This is usually done with a director or a producer who is defining what the final look is going to look like. You work with the producer to define the camera angle. The next thing we do is we're going to create a photometric light. We're going to pop it into our scene. We're going to set our viewport, as Logan said a little bit earlier, to Arnold. That's really cool. Not just a viewport that's real time. You can also render in the Max viewport using Arnold. That's pretty neat. So as you render, it's black. And people often get hung up on this and they don't know why. So the reason it's black is because a light by default is not very bright in Max. And so we need to increase the brightness and adjust the exposure. So here we're just modifying some settings on the light itself. And we are now basically able to see what that light looks like and how it's impacting the final render. Now you see it's a point light, so it's generating very crisp and hard shadows. That might be a look you're looking for. If not, set your light mode to quad. It's basically an area light. The bigger the quad, the more blurry your reflections are going to be and smoother they're going to be. And the smaller the quad, the crisper they're going to be. Now, when you introduce area lighting, you introduce noise. If you ask any Arnold user out there who's learning Arnold, the hardest thing about figuring out, hardest thing about Arnold is getting rid of noise. And in fact, if you just know how to find noise and where it's coming from, it's actually the easiest thing to deal with. There are folks out there that are going to see this and go into the render settings and increase my diffuse samples and through the roof. Yeah, they'll get rid of noise, but their render times are going to go through the roof, right? So we don't want that. We want to know exactly where noise is coming from. In this case here, it's pretty simple. Added a light, it made noise. It's probably on the light. So let's go onto the light and see how to solve that. On the light object itself, you have sampling. So it's by default quite low, to speed up render times. So you want to go in and just dial that up a little bit. And now you're going to smooth out your area shadows and you're not going to dramatically increase your render times. This is how you tame Arnold. You don't go to the render settings and go all haywire and increase all those samples. You go to where the noise is coming from. On the lights, I can adjust my temperature, my exposure. I can create a mood. I can do anything I want. There's all sorts of settings in there. I can create a copy of that light to create my second 3-point lighting. And maybe adjust some of the coloring there, the temperature there. Add my above light for some nice soft shadows. And you get to basically this. And again, this is just, a couple of hours of tweaking some lights, and I mean, not even a couple of hours, maybe an hour. And very quickly, you can achieve this look using basically photometric lights. Okay, so I'm going to introduce this section here, scan geometry. This is just, if anyone's not familiar, scan geometry is the process of photographing models and, real products and generating models for those photos. The process usually involves taking photos of all the different angles of the actual object itself, taking those photos and bring them into a photogrammetry application like Recap. We also have, so if you're not familiar with Recap, it's an Autodesk product. It handles these types of workflows. And then a mesh is generated. Then that mesh is sent into a product like Max for cleanup and for usage later on. The more sophisticated studios that I've worked with actually have photogrammetry rigs. It's basically a box with a camera that is on a rig that actually animates and turns around the product at different angles and snaps an image at every couple of degrees angle. And all of that content is sent then into Recap, like I said, to create a model from. Logan, do you want to talk about what do we do with those models and why they're so challenging to work with? They're a great way of starting, but they sometimes can be challenging.
Exactly, yeah. So typically what people do is called retopology. And historically, this has been a very time-consuming process where the artist has to go in, they define where they want like a new vertice that kind of like goes over top of the mesh, and they kind of like rebuild this high-quality mesh as a clean, usually quad-based output to it. So not a lot of fun. You could spend hours and hours and hours at it. To solve this in Max, we actually introduced something called the retopology modifier. So this is just a simple modifier. Look, I don't want to spend a ton of time cleaning up the stuff. You don't either. So the whole idea was, yeah, we just want to apply a modifier onto the object, give it some settings like a quad polygon count target that you want to hit for, and provide some max parameters from the mesh data that you've got. Things like material ID, borders, smoothing groups, hard edges, things like that that are already defined, Boolean seams and so forth. And you can pass all that data through the modifier, and it will use an algorithm, one of many algorithms, but the one that we recommend and promote is the Autodesk Reform algorithm. And it gives you on the output a nice clean quad mesh output. So something that's very useful, very powerful to use. And it's incredibly useful if you get like things that have like a lot of triangulated mesh data, or that you saw with that photogrammetry data, where it's just polygon soup and you're looking at it saying, how the heck am I ever going to work with this and turn it into content I can use? So this is why we made the retopology modifier, and it's been out there for all Max users since Max 2021. We continue to update it and make modifications to it to kind of continue to make it faster and give better results. And I think Jose is going to show off a little bit of an example next.
Yeah, and it's not just for photogrammetry, right? I want to make this clear. Like, oftentimes CAD models too come in, and there are soups of triangles too, and you want to get, fix those. This is a really great example. On the left side, some part of this image, there's triangulated CAD models, and then they go through Reform, and it's a beautiful topology, right? Maintaining those hard edges. Yeah. So as Logan said, I do have a workflow I'm going to show you quite quickly. So this is a scan of a mask of a tiger, a metallic mask that was brought into Max. And so this is a retopology workflow, or sort of a let's go from something we can't use to something we can use workflow. So if you're gonna go down the retopology road, which is what we're gonna do here, you want to make sure that you're starting off with as simple of a mesh as you can. Retopo has made strides, and it's really performant now. It's got the background processing, and it's really good. But you still want to be mindful of, it's a compute-intensive process, so you want to be mindful of maintaining a decent mesh to start with. This is a symmetrical mesh, so I'm going to use the slice modifier. Sorry about that. I'm going to use the slice modifier to get rid of half of it, because I don't need half. If it's symmetrical, I can bring back the other half using symmetry later. So we're using slice modifier, great modifier, to get rid of part of your mesh. In this case here, we're going to remove the top, and now I'm left with just half my mesh. On top of this, I'm going to decimate it using the Pro Optimizer modifier. The Pro Optimizer modifier does a really nice job of decimating while maintaining overall model fidelity, model volume. But it does produce some visual artifacts, and it does produce, triangles. And so we can use a few other modifiers in Max, like the smooth modifier, perhaps the weighted normals modifier, to clean a little bit of that up. This is now ready for retopo. Throw on retopo, make sure I'm set to reform. I got a bunch of settings in here to adjust the calculation and what the end result will be. But I'm going to give it a polygon budget, hit compute, and it will create nice, clean, quad-based geometry, as seen in this next little video here. This is before and after. On the right-hand side, they look identical. I want to make that clear. And by the way, you saw that retopo reduced or sort of smoothed out a little bit too much your mesh. Don't fret about that, because with texture baking, which I'll show you just in a minute, texture baking allows you to capture all that high-res detail, store it as normal maps, and you cannot tell the difference between geometry and normal map sort of 3D effects. But on one side you see this the original crappy geometry, on the other side you see the clean quad-based geometry. As easy as that. All right, let's look at some enhanced modeling workflows. And as we inch our way towards the end of the presentation, so we've added some pretty cool new paradigms in Max, one of them being the Boolean modifier. This is a game changer, in my opinion. A complete parametric end-to-end workflow where any change is made at any moment in time and it's consumed at any part of the process. It's really game-changing, in my opinion. It's paradigm shifting. It's unlike any other workflow I've seen in any other product. Here we have a cylinder, and we have a chamfer modifier on top of it that's creating those nice beveled edges. And so we're going to bring in our torus as a operand, and we're going to set it to standard addition. And here I'm just using the shift key to create multiple copies of this tube. And we're just setting it to subtract versus addition to create that overall base volume that we saw in the reference image of our telescope. Again, using the shift key makes it really easy to just create a clone of it, change its operand type, its operation type. Now, what's really cool is that, like I said, fully parametric. Why? Is because those tubes probably had their own modifier stacks. Previous workflows with previous Boolean systems in Max, those would get squashed. In the Boolean modifier system, they are not squashed. They are maintained. They are preserved. Meaning I can click on an operand in the modifier stack and access its modifier stack. On its modifier stack, I stored a selection of faces, which we're going to access right here. I'm going to go into my embedded poly face, go into my ribs selection set, and I'm going to go ahead and extrude these by face. Now, what's happening here is that this is all being picked up by the Boolean and then being chamfered on top, right? Remember, fully parametric, end to end. On this, I'm going to go into local align mode so I can scale these faces along their own local normal. I'm going to convert my selection to vertex, collapse to create my ribs. On this object, again, I'm on the upper end level. I'm going to add an array modifier, create my extended layer of ribs. And all of this is just being consumed super nicely and elegantly by the Boolean modifier. I'm going to unhide this little box here, use radial array. Array is what we added also last year to create my ribs. And again, being picked up by the Boolean modifier, I'm just making changes to my array settings. I'm dialing in more array count, changing the size of my box on my primitive level. Like everything is accessible at any moment in time. It's freaking awesome. If you haven't tried new Booleans, please give it a try. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep going here really quick. I want to make sure we cover the conform modifier as well. And this is basically a modifier that allows you to take one piece of geometry and put it onto another object. You can assign it, slap it onto it, and maintain volume, or you can shrink wrap it. I'll show you guys a quick little workflow here for assigning and creating skin on a wire. So we have the skin geometry using conform set to shrink wrap. I can shrink wrap it to the wires. On top of this, I can add a little bit of a relax using the relax modifier. Again, everything Max is modifier based, so it's non-destructive. I can make changes at any time, which is a really cool way of working. And we're using Intel's ray tracing open source technology. We're the only DCC tool to have this. It's lightning fast. You can you can conform using raycasting any number of polygons to any number of polygons. Images aren't enough. We're approaching the end of the deck here. So this is around create this try before you buy experiences, augmented reality experiences, or 3D product configurator experiences, or maybe hosting a 3D model on the web to better understand what it looks like. The idea is, how do I convert my browser to a buyer? How do I accelerate the buying cycle? This is what this technology brings to the table. And it's a picture poison kind of thing. It depends on the product you make, and it depends the experience you want to generate. One thing to note is that going from CAD to real-time is not something you can do without using Drake does not approve. You need to use something like 3ds Max to get those models clean, lightweight, web ready. This is another illustration of that. Depending on your target platform, if you're rendering with Arnold, you can leave it as is, it's fine. If you're rendering with a game engine, you want to reduce that down to something more manageable. Real-time web stuff, super lightweight, right? And I won't walk through this whole workflow because we are nearing the end of the presentation, but this is another conform workflow where I basically take a box to have my high-res mesh, my original single source of truth mesh, and I'm using a box using the conform brushes of Max. I can very quickly paint and conform my low-res mesh to my high-res mesh to create the overall volume that I want. And then I'm going to use texture baking. I'm going to give it some UVs, of course. And then here's what we're going to do is use texture baking to extract all that high-res detail from the original cushion and store that as texture maps. I can extract all my PBR inputs, my base, my diffuse, my roughness, my metalness, my AO, and my normals. Use those as a PBR texture kit like I showed you earlier, and now you can have a super simplified, extremely lightweight version of your chair. They look almost identical. Of course, the silhouette's a little bit different because there's 900 faces versus 264,000 faces, but they look really, really good. And these are just some examples of that in action. Again, different models that went through the same process. And then all of this gets sent to GLTF. We support GLTF natively inside of Max now. You can take any model, export to GLTF. You can use a GLTF material as well to get these into a WebGL friendly format to then put into an AR experience, perhaps host it on the web, whatever it is, right? And Drake is impressed by this. So with that, we've reached the end of the webinar, at least the end of my presentation, our presentation. And we got still 10 minutes left, and we want to start answering some questions. So let me look at the question list here. Logan put some things in. Logan put some things in. Any questions, please throw them in. Q&A, there it is, sorry. Do we need the model in the quad for product visualization? Again, it depends. I say, and Logan, maybe you can add some color here. Generally speaking, you want everything in quads, right? I mean, we're really, the need for quads is truthfully really, really needed is in when you're deforming geometry, like in character animation, especially in real-time game engines. If you don't have nice, clean edge loops that are quad-based, you will see artifacts. That is obviously not the case in product design. So it's more about making something lightweight, but you're always in a better, safer space if you have clean quad-based geometry. Do you want to add to that, Logan? Or
Yeah, I was gonna say, quads, triangles, n-gons. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much. Like the way that our renderers work and the way the game engines work, everything gets converted to triangles. But the reason why we want to try to keep pure quads a lot of the time, especially as modelers, is it makes it easier to have selections. So you've got edge loop selections, ring loop selections. Makes it much easier to kind of like understand the shape and the form and kind of look at it and break it down as an artist, as a creative, to kind of work with it. Obviously can't really do it as well with triangles, and those extra edges are going to cause some problems. N-gons, there's a bit of a debate, I think, for people out there, whether or not you should have n-gons. So n-gons are being like polygons with more than 4 sides to them. Generally speaking, I find that they work very well. It's only when you're dealing with, like, as Jose said, deforming shapes, or you're trying to sculpt stuff and you got certain algorithms that just cannot work on anything, anything other than a quad. So embrace the n-gons, embrace the quads when you can. At the very least, it's going to keep you sane and happy as an artist.
yeah, definitely, like, triangle based geometry. If you're strictly taking the model and you're rendering it, nothing else, like maybe, but the minute you want to do any kind of manipulation to the mesh, it's over. There's nothing you can do. No tools support, proper edge manipulation of a triangular based model. Like, it's just not going to happen. So I would definitely say get it in quads as much as possible. Another question, I'm going to answer this live. Autodesk, can we have a recording of the session? I believe everyone, this is recorded. So I believe everyone who is here today will get a recording. TBD on that, but I'm pretty sure. Another question here. Will we ever get Mudbox and 3ds Max at some point? That would speed up the modeling. I know you can't confirm, but are you thinking maybe this will be included in distant future? Yes, and great information presentation. Thank you, by the way. I will say everything's on the table. We have certainly been observing Mudbox and seeing how and what it can come in. It's not about whether we want Mudbox and Max or not. I think that's a resounding yes. I think it's more about how does it prioritize against other initiatives? And it's really the $100 bill example, right? Or exercise. We don't have an unlimited amount of resources to work on developing Max or Miter or any product out on this for that matter. So it's always about prioritizing. And to be totally transparent, we have looked at Mudbox, some of the Mudbox features, like brushes specifically. I personally would love to see Mudbox sculpting brushes in Max. But there's an order of priority of things, and there's some needs become a little bit too niche to a specific, very small subset of people. Whereas other initiatives we tend to work on, I'm not saying this is the case, but definitely we tend to prioritize work that impacts the highest number of users that use Max. So that's how we prioritize work. And maybe Logan, if you want to add a bit to that, that's kind of how
I think you summed it up pretty good, Jose. Yeah.
Good. Okay, thanks. That was done. I can answer live. Another question here. How can I make sure to stay up to date with 3ds Max tools? Because it's like an ocean and I'm always overwhelmed about the fact that it's an ocean. I don't disagree with you. My challenge that I have is personally is how do we get the message out about the things we do? I guess sort of answers your question. How do we get the message out more effectively? I would say, like, what we do is always on our YouTube page for sure, like our YouTube learning channel, like the Max Learning channel. I believe they all go there. We also have the area where we post all of our articles whenever we have new releases. If you're not familiar with the area, it's called thearea.com. It's an Autodesk branded website. And it's strictly for the M&E industry. So Max, Maya, film, TV, games, you name it. Anything we build in Max and we launch, it pops up there first. So if you want to stay up to date, go onto the area, sign up, get a newsletter, and you'll be the first to know when a new release of Max comes out, what features are in there. And then eventually tutorials get trickled in later on. by some folks internally, even some external folks that we work with to help create tutorial content for our releases.
Yeah, I'm just going to add on to that. Is we're obviously always trying to update Max. We're always trying to put new improvements into it. We don't like the idea of trying to be like, oh, it's the new major release. Here's all the new features you're going to work on, and then everything else can be bug fixes. We want to always like react to your feedback and how you're using it and how you guys want to see it. We're also trying to always improve the software, make it faster, make it better, add more features to it. And this includes stuff that, maybe we release. So yeah, I get that it can feel like a bit of an ocean for what's going on there. We are certainly trying to do what we can to improve things, but as always, there's a lot of really good kind of community channels out there as well. On that you see on social media platforms. I think there's some really good groups on Facebook, like the Stack group, that kind of does a really good job of it. We got some power users like Aloy Andaluz, who does he's got a 3ds Max YouTube channel, What's New in 3ds Max every month. He does a fantastic job of kind of talking about those features and how things work there. So I would say, take a look at his stuff. Chengsu Yoon does some really good examples as well. But, the community is also a great place to learn and see what else is possible, because I think you guys are going to push it as far and as hard as we can do it, or even maybe more so.
Yeah, I couldn't say that better. I'm glad you went there. I didn't immediately think of community, but that is probably the best source. And just to reiterate what Logan said, Facebook Stack is a group of just Max artists and Max content and Max news. And Eloy Andaluz has got a YouTube page, like Logan said. He does the Max news every month. I mean, if you want to know what's going on with Max, that's your place. 100%. All right, well, we're at time. It's 11:30. I don't see any more questions.
There's a couple in the chat. Maybe just one about, can you export animation from GLTF?
Sorry,
GLTF does support it. The default exporter in Max doesn't support animations, but there are a ton of other GLTF methods that you can push your Max data through to have animation support.
And there's one more comment on the questions, Greg. I'm not denying that. So Greg's, great presentation on the viewports, but there's shortcomings too, and there are, and no one's denying that. I don't think that the Max viewport is suitable for specific types of content that you want to produce and render out. Specifically, things with shadows or, architectural type projects that have buildings and inside areas. That I wouldn't promote it for that. But for rendering single objects and visualizing single assets, which in the game space and in the product space are sort of king, right? In the game space, it's all about a prop or a character and understanding where how your PBR shader is behaving and some of the lighting. I think it's a great report, and that'll stand behind any day, any time of the day. But I will stand behind it for sure for other areas. There are things that it still doesn't do, and I would like it to do. And I know there's been some research internally about supporting better contact shadows, object shadows, or even volume fogging or things like that, like we just don't do in the Max report. Like, it doesn't do everything for sure, but what it does do, it does it really nicely and elegantly, and that'll stand behind any day. Thanks, Greg, for that comment. I appreciate that. Okay, we're at time. I don't planning real-time rendering engine similar to Enscape for Lunar. I couldn't say. It's not something that I've seen on anyone's radar. Not saying it's not happening, just not saying I haven't heard about it. Just saying I haven't heard about it. Sorry, the question was
by like other groups within Autodesk. So if you look up something like Autodesk Aurora, it's an example of doing like literally real-time ray trace rendering engines. It's not our group, but Autodesk is a big company and we're doing some really cool stuff. So as Autodesk as a whole thinking about this, yes, I don't know if it's been productized just yet, but we will see what the future holds.
And I think we answered these last questions already in the chat. I'm going to say this was answered live. I think we went through everything. I don't see anything else. I see a lot of people saying great presentation, so thank you so much. And Logan, I'm sure you appreciate that too. And we're a little bit past time, so I mean, unless anyone has any more last minute questions, going once, going twice, going three, going four. I think we're gonna call it a day. I personally want to thank everyone for joining. I'm sure Logan appreciates all your attendance as well. This was fun. I hope I do it again. I hope Autodesk invites me again to do this again. So I think we're closing it out. Is that right, Logan?
Yeah, I think we are wrapping up. So thank you everybody for tuning in and being here and all the great questions and participation. Hope you learned a lot. And if you have anything else, follow up through us through your usual social media channels.
Okay. Thank you, guys.